Welcome back to another video where today we're going to be talking about everything One Piece live action season 2. In this video, we're going to be breaking it down, going over the changes they made from the One Piece manga and anime, talking about those Easter eggs and references that happened because they made those changes, and just going over what I thought of the theories as a whole. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a review, just a basic one, and then we're going to go through it and talk more about the review as we're talking about the different changes, the Easter eggs and references, and all that episode by episode. So with that, let's jump straight into the review, where honestly, I thought this series did a pretty great job compared to season 1. Even with the changes they made during the story, I think it flowed really well. The only thing I was really disappointed in this season was the fact that we never got Karoo, Vivi's duck. It's the only thing that really bothered me because he was a big part in the earlier parts of One Piece until we got to Alabasta. A lot of fun comedic scenes. And that's also another thing where I felt they took out a lot of comedy when it came to One Piece with the live action, making it more serious, more grounded. But that's just me missing the more nostalgia days with early One Piece, because they did get more serious after the time skip. You know, it feels like they sped that up a little bit because we are dealing with live action. We're dealing with limited episodes. The story's not going to go probably all the way till the end like the anime and the manga does. But that's only a minor complaint by me feeling nostalgic after watching early days of One Piece once again. Now, I do think with the casting of Vivi, they did an absolutely fantastic job. Teresa Trundra did such a good job as Vivi, and I'm very apologetic if I pronounced her name horribly wrong, but she's fantastic. I felt like Vivi. She did this fantastic job. I've seen her in like one other thing. She's just a great actress overall. Honestly, everyone who did their characters did an amazing job. Katie Sagal, who did a great job as Dr. Greha, like she was the second best choice for this character after Jamie Lee Curtis, who couldn't do it. So just honestly amazing casting, and I just loved everything they did with her character. Even though she was missing some of the more chaotic side to her character, I think they still did a great job nonetheless. Now, when it came to the characterizations, I think they did a fantastic job with Sanji. He's more of a gentleman rather than just being a perv. So I think he has all the qualities of what Sanji has, just being that less of a perv that he is in the anime and manga, which I think really works well for the live action and just makes me like his character a little bit more. Now, Zoro struggling with Mihawk is a great freaking thing they added into this, because it's something we never really dealt with too much of in the anime and manga, but this, they really focused on it with him seeing visions of Mihawk, thinking he's not strong enough, and then even giving us a moment with Zoro and Luffy talking about it, and Luffy believing him as his captain. So like really good moments to push these characters forward and give them more bonding moments to really help make them feel like a crew. We even had Usopp being less of a coward in certain ways, where he's less of like an annoying coward who's constantly running away, but having him giving him moments like in Little Garden when he goes to save Luffy from drowning. Like I think these added moments to his character, giving us more of that Elbaf story of him wanting to be a brave warrior of the sea. So it really pushed his character forward, and I really like what they did. Now Luffy in this season as well was a stronger leader, doing more stuff to help people, which kind of focuses more on him being a hero and wanting to help his friends, which, you know, in the anime and manga, he's more comedic. He does still do this stuff, but with the comedy, it kind of pushes some of that stuff down. But in this, it really focuses on it, which I think helps his character a lot. Zoro and Luffy also seem a lot weaker in this because it's live action, but Oda did talk about how these characters he felt were too OP when he first started the story. So now with making them a little bit powered down, it kind of gives us stakes and gives us consequences and makes us feel like they're actually struggling when they take on these fights, which I think works for this story as well. Season 2 also just had great set design, great costume design, great sound design, like all the different things added and made it feel like the One Piece world really worked well for it, and I cannot commend them enough for that. Having added parts with Smoker and Garp were really well done, giving Smoker more of a purpose, so he's not just going after Luffy and trying to track down the Straw Hats. Instead, he's actually going after Baroque Works, which I think works for the story to give him more purpose, pushes his story forward, and gives us more of Smoker, because we didn't get too much of that. We just kind of saw parts until we got to Alabasta. Chopper's backstory alone was perfection. I have no notes on that. They only missed a couple things from his main backstory, but I think it works so well, and Chopper is just amazing. I love the way he looks. Heavy Point is a little odd looking, but I think that's the only way they're going to be able to do it, because Chopper's forms aren't going to translate the best in live action. So I love how they kind of made it work, and Chopper is just amazing. I love Chopper, so I'm glad of what they've done. Now, the added story with Baroque Works in the beginning of the season 2 and also just throughout it was nice, because it just gave us more of Baroque Works, like adding them more into the story, tying them into more different plot points, and also giving Miss All Sunday more moments, really focuses on her being a main character going forward and helping her have the importance of what's to come, especially with the name reveal of Nico Robin at the end of the season, which is earlier because we didn't get that until Alabasta. So I like how they're kind of pushing some of this stuff forward to kind of get us ready for the next crewmate of the Straw Hats. One of the other things they did in this is they definitely killed off a bunch of characters that they don't do in the anime and manga, but that's just kind of a One Piece thing, where in the anime and manga, it's very alluded to that if they actually died or not, which most characters don't die, they get fake out deaths, where in this, we actually took people out. Like, it looked like we took out Miss Valentine and Mr. Five in Little Garden. They took out Igaram and Whiskey Peak. So the characters are actually having consequences to their deaths rather than being fake outs to give more emotional moments and also taking out the bad guys rather than just leaving them around. But we'll see if some of these characters are actually dead when we do get to the Alabasta arc, and in future arcs if they actually reappear or we get mentioned them once again. But overall, I really enjoyed the story. I only have like some notes where I'm like, I'm disappointed like Crew wasn't in there, the Laphams weren't there for Drum Island, but overall, really good season, pretty good moments, and I really loved everything that went on with it, especially that we got Laboon's backstory with Brooke appearing really early, which I do enjoy because that is tied to Laboon, and you know, we didn't have to allude to it, and we just kind of got the tease for what's to come in the future. But with that, we're going to be jumping into episode 1, going over the Easter eggs, references, and the story changes, and some of the moments I enjoyed from that. So let's go into episode 1. With episode 1, it does start off with Baroque Works attacking a Marine base to find one of their comrades that Zoro had sliced in half, giving us a new story where Baroque Works is going after Zoro because he took out some of their agents, and they're not happy about that. Which, in the anime and manga, it does talk about how Baroque Works tries to recruit Zoro, and he declined them, but they don't specifically target him because he took out one of their crew. But it does give us Miss All Sunday, aka Nico Robin, using her flower fruit to take out the soldiers, snapping their necks, and showing her actually killing people, where in the anime and manga, when she does snap them, most of these people actually do survive and they don't actually die. So it's showing her being a little bit more of a threatening villain for this season and showing what her potential is, and I really love how they showed up for Devil Fruit right away. Now, because they also are targeting Zoro and the Straw Hats right away, it's different from the main story because of the fact that they don't really start going after them until Whiskey Peak. So I just like the added story where they're starting to target these characters more to set them up more of a threat for this season, and also kind of works in more of a story perspective when they do it that way, because it makes it flow a little bit more and setting up all these story points that'll interconnect throughout the season. Luffy being excited to go to Logtown is straight out of the source material, with him wanting to go to Gold Roger's execution platform, so great they kept that in. However, they did change it up quite a bit, but we'll talk about that in a second, because first we have to talk about how Gold Roger and Garp were reminiscing about the old days in that flashback before Gold Roger's execution. Now, in this scene, Roger tells Garp about having a son. Now, we actually don't get the scene in the anime until episode 460, and in the manga, we don't get it until chapter 551. So they definitely brought this up a little bit earlier, but I think it works within the scenes because we are talking about Gold Roger's execution, which they do talk about early on, but we just don't get that added scene with Garp and Roger until now. They also mention God Valley and how Garp is someone he can trust because of everything they've been through, which is a direct reference to that scene while they're talking about Ace. And then on top of it, God Valley is something we don't really learn about much until the last couple years, where we get to learn about it in the Elbaf arc in the flashback of what Garp and Roger went through when they were on that island. Now, when the Trots do reach Logtown, we get to see a bunch of Easter eggs and references when it comes to characters in the One Piece world. Like, we see Manmeyer building, which is a royal family from the Holy Land, which we recently learned about in the manga during the God Valley flashback. And we also see a Figureland Square Wine and Spirits sign, which this sign references Garling Fingerland, which this sign references Saint Figureland Garling. Now, another great piece they kept in from the anime and manga is when Nami gives Zoro money, she says that he'll owe her 300% interest, which is great because that's something she does. Nami is money hungry, so I'm glad they kept this in there because it's a nice classic moment. Now, Smoker arrives, love the costume, but the person he takes out is actually someone Tashiki takes out in the anime and manga, so they changed it up quite a bit, but Smoker's costume design looks fantastic. His freaking bike looks amazing. He's a pretty badass, and I love what they did with him. And speaking of Smoker, they also kept in a scene from the anime where a girl walks up to him and spills ice cream on his pants, and he ends up giving her money to buy more scoops, which is just a really nice scene to show that he's not such a hardhead, and that he's also a softie in some ways. During the scenes of the Straw Hats shopping around as well, we get to see one of the characters from the anime and manga, which is the shop owner that Nami goes to buy a bunch of clothes from. We also see Usopp talking to someone about buying some goggles, and at least some filler episodes, he actually gets it by facing Daddy the father after his daughter tries to get it for him, and Usopp has to face him in this little fun filler scene. And the girl he's talking to doesn't look like a shop owner, it actually looks like it's probably Carol, Daddy the father's kid. So it's from the anime. It's not canon, but it is a nice little reference I thought of when I saw this scene. When Nami and Usopp are walking through the town, they end up running into Bartolomeo, a character who doesn't appear until episode 633 of One Piece and chapter 705 during the Dressrosa arc. Now, in the anime and manga, we also learn that he was in Logtown during this arc. We see that way later rather than already seeing them interacting, but I think his added scenes in this were pretty well done and also adds to his character, so we'll talk about more of that when we get to more of those scenes. Now, when Zoro is running into Tashigi and she drops her glasses, that's a reference to the manga because she actually takes down the two pirates, and then Zoro gives her glasses, while in the anime, Zoro actually breaks her glasses because it's a nice filler scene to make him go work for her after for a bit. Now they go to the sword shop, which is an absolutely amazing scene. I think the set is way more well done than anime and manga. It's just more detailed. It feels like a very cool set. And we have Tashigi nerding out about the Wado Ichimoji, which is great, just like how it is in the anime and manga. We get Kitetsu, the Cursed Blade, which looks sick as all hell. And then we get Zoro getting his other blade, the Yubashiri, which is great. But I love that they still kept the Kitetsu scene in when he throws a sword up and he sticks his arm out. They sped up the scene quite a bit, but I do love how they added it in there because it's just a great moment to show how Zoro is the master of blades. When he's fighting Tashigi later in that episode too, even though that fight ends a little quicker compared to the anime and manga, we do get a cool little Easter egg and reference to a character named Pedro, where we see Pedro's wanted poster on the side of the wall, which is a character we don't actually first meet until episode 754 and chapter 805 of One Piece during the Zhao arc. Now, when Sanji goes to get his bluefish elephant tuna, that happens in the manga when he gets it from a vendor, but in the anime, there's actually a filler part where he competes in a cooking competition for it. They kept in the canon part, took out the filler, makes sense, but that's a little different from that scene as well. They reference the Baratie in this part, how the Baratie have been buying up all the bluefish tuna for Sanji's dish, so just a nice little reference to the Baratie, where Sanji came from. And also the bluefish elephant tuna is way bigger in the anime. It is double the size of the characters, and it takes 2 of them to carry it around. It makes sense why they didn't do it here, but it would have been a little comedic to see a giant fish with them walking around with it. When they're in Logtown as well, one of the differences is Luffy doesn't actually go with Sanji. He actually goes off by himself, runs into Smoker, and then starts his little journey through Logtown to find where Roger's execution platform is, runs into Zoro, ends up losing Zoro when his hack is blown away, and that's where he reaches the execution platform. Usopp also makes a call to Kaya during this, which I don't remember happening in the anime or manga, but it's a nice little scene to kind of refer back to his roots. But when Luffy does get to the execution platform, this scene is completely changed, where we have a giant circus going around because of Buggy, which is something that does not happen at all in anime and manga. Instead, when Luffy's at the execution platform looking at it, Buggy surprises him and reveals himself to try to take Luffy out for the revenge. But I think the scene adds a lot more because it adds some more comedic scenes here. Buggy's a great character. I love what Jeff Ward's done with him, and it's just great to see more Buggy. I can never get enough of Buggy, so it's great to see. Now, I find that Buggy in this is also a little bit more eccentric when it comes to his character, like more a little bit trying to be evil, but he's not, and I do love what they're doing with him. Buggy and Bartolomeo also don't interact, so they added that scene in there to give us more with this story about Bartolomeo being there, because in the anime and manga, Bartolomeo sees what happened to Luffy on that execution platform, but he didn't interact with any of the characters while he's in Logtown. Now, when Luffy actually sees Alvida for the first time in the anime, again, he doesn't recognize her, but in this, they switched it around, so he does recognize her to make Buggy a little bit more pissed off. He doesn't recognize who Buggy is, so it's kind of a fun scene here. You know, they only tweak things here and there, but I think it's a lot of fun. And now, he actually climbed the scaffolding and then gets ambushed by Buggy at the top, where in this, Buggy actually takes him to the top to get him executed. So they added a couple different things here, where they also added a court scene, which was just a nice fun scene between Buggy and Luffy and trying to judge him for what he's done. Now, it's great that they still kept in the execution platform part. In the anime and manga, Zoro and Sanji are actually the only 2 that show up at the execution platform to help Luffy when they start fighting the Buggy pirates. But then when Buggy goes to execute him, Luffy pretty much says the same stuff now. We're saying, sorry guys, I'm dead. And then they get struck by lightning. Where in this, they actually kind of focus more on Buggy getting struck by lightning rather than both of them being struck by lightning, which could be a tease for what Dragon's powers are, which everyone's been assuming that his powers are storm-based, which they kind of allude more to in this because of how when he grabs Smoker, he blows him away later in the episode. So it makes it feel more like Dragon has that storm powers than it does in the anime and manga. But we're still waiting on that reveal, so maybe one day we'll know for sure. Now, the fight scene with the Buggy Pirates was actually a lot of fun. Seeing Nami and Usopp help out, sending Alvida away was a good moment, and it just had some pretty cool fights overall. But when Luffy gets back up, I love the added scene of Bartolomeo being the one to give Luffy his straw hat back, and that starts to spark Bartolomeo's fandom when it comes to who Luffy is. So these added scenes add to his character and what he's going to be in the future, so I do like how they've added it in here. Now, the first fight with Smoker as well, you know, Sanji actually starts to run back to the ship to help everyone when Luffy is the one dealing with this. And they changed up a bit where Sanji tries to help out, but Smoker is the one to take on Luffy by himself and almost takes him down until Dragon comes in to help. And I love the way they use the smoke powers here. It just looks so good, and it feels like that fight from the beginning of the anime. Having Dragon come in was a badass moment. It looked great. It felt like it's supposed to, and it just looks great. Overall, I feel like I have no notes for that, but the only difference is when Luffy gets saved by Dragon, Dragon actually blows everyone away, where he blows Luffy towards the ship, and Sanji and all of them all kind of get blown back towards where they're supposed to go, and then Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji have to jump onto the Mary because Nami had already started to set sail because of the storm that had arrived. Now, one of the things that they changed here, too, is that we actually get to see Sabo for the first time, who we actually don't see until episode 6663 of One Piece and chapter 731 during the Dressrosa arc, where we see his full adult form, because we do get to see flashbacks of him during the Marineford arc with Luffy and Ace when they're growing up, but we don't see him until way later. So it does make me wonder what parts of his story they're going to be changing and what's kind of going to be going on there with his character going forward, especially if this live action doesn't make it past a certain arc. Now, at the end of the episode, we get to see Tashigi interacting with Robin, which is something we don't see in the anime or manga at all. It's just a scene of Robin trying to recruit her to Baroque Works, which is different from the anime and manga, because that does not happen, and it's just an interesting scene to kind of set up more Baroque Works and what they're trying to do. Smoker also mentions Raul at the end when they're getting the drinks at the bar, which he says he goes there every year on the anniversary of Gold Roger's execution to get a drink. Now, this is also a filler scene from the anime, so nice reference to that, which we also got Luffy in the anime going there as well and learning about Gold Roger's execution. But that was episode 1. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments down below, and now let's jump into episode 2. Now, the episode 2 leads us to Reverse Mountain. And honestly, visually, this was an absolute cool scene. Getting to see the shipwrecks all on the sides of the mountain, like, it just shows how dangerous this trek is, how the Straw Hats have to get over it. And it was just a fun moment of them going over and then meeting Laboon. Absolutely fantastic moment. Love Laboon, and the design for this giant whale just looks absolutely ridiculous, and I love it so much. Now, the start of the episode with the logo, too, it had the Rumbar Pirates, Jolly Roger, and Brook's violin, which was great to see, because Brook would be in this episode. Now, they changed it up quite a bit, because when they go to Laboon in the start, they avoid it. Now, when they avoid Laboon, Luffy ends up punching him, pissing him off, and then the Straw Hats get swallowed up by Laboon, and Luffy gets on top, and then ends up finding his way inside the whale, rather than how they played it up here, where instead the Straw Hats get eaten up. Luffy ends up waking up on the ground of Reverse Mountain next to the ocean, and he also references Dadan when he's waking up, which is the first reference we've gotten of her, the woman that raised Luffy, which we wouldn't actually get until the Marineford arc in chapter 582 in episode 493 of the anime. But with this change up, they also changed up Crocus quite a bit, because in the anime and manga, he's actually living inside Laboon. Laboon has walls inside of him, he has a scenery placed in, he's a little mini island, and he's treating Laboon from within. But in this, he's actually living on the side of the island, still injecting him with that tranquilizer from the land rather than inside him. However, while the Straw Hats are inside Laboon, Usopp does mention possibly living inside of him because of how big he is, so it is a nice reference to what actually happens in the anime and manga. And then as the story kept progressing, we have Garp actually checking in on Smoker, which is something we don't actually see in the anime and manga. We don't really see them interacting at all. So it's something to kind of add to this, and also mentioning Alabasta, the brink of civil war, Vivi missing, the Revolution Army, and their leader. But with this going on, they also set up Smoker having a purpose. Rather than just chasing the Straw Hats into the Grand Line like he does in the anime and manga, he's actually going to be going after Baroque Works and being instructed to do that. So they're adding their characters' interaction in, knowing Baroque Works is a threat, and kind of tying in these storylines that we never really got in the anime and manga, where in the manga and anime, Smoker deals with Baroque Works after he gets to Alabasta and learns about what's really going on. Now, the Straw Hats meeting Mr. Anonymous Wednesday, that doesn't happen the same way in the anime and manga, where instead, when they meet him, they don't meet him by running into them and fighting them within inside Laboon in this dark space. They actually run into them when Luffy falls into the main stomach of Laboon by launching both of them with him after Laboon rises himself up. And they're actually trying to get whale meat for Whiskey Peak, and that's their whole mission and why they're there. They're actually trying to kill Laboon, where in this, they actually just got swallowed up and were trying to escape. However, this fight scene with Mr. Nine was fun, with Sanji and Usopp going against him. Seeing Miss Wednesday fighting Nami was great as well. And then also Zoro's dumb plan to try to get outside of Laboon felt like a typical Zoro move, and I thought that was a lot of fun. But that's where we start to get some of the major changes from the story as well when it comes to Laboon's backstory. Now, Crocus does tell everyone about Laboon, him meeting the Rumbar Pirates, and we get to see their leader, Captain Yorkie, but he does get a new design later in the anime and manga. But in the initial starts, we do get to meet them, but we don't meet Brook. We don't actually get this full story until episode 3080 and chapter 487 of One Piece. So they did speed this up quite a bit, where we do actually get to see Brook, Captain Yorkie, and the rest of the crew and how Laboon got there. Where in Laboon's original backstory, which we see in this time of One Piece, it's just showing how he was over there with the Rumbar Pirates and how they left. But this, we actually got more detail. We got to see Crocus talking to them, which is something we got actually during Brook's backstory. But I do like this change up, because this is the same story we got. We just got 300 episodes later when Oda was writing the story and kind of found a way to connect the characters. And we got the yo ho 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 ho, which sounded great. Brook's violin was absolutely fantastic. We got them singing Banks Brew. Just all these amazing moments to kind of tease what's to come when we do meet Brook and actually learn more about his full backstory, about what happens after Laboon. But I do love how they added this in here early, even though it is a major change. And it just was sad because we get to see poor Laboon losing them and them not coming back, which just, you know, it's depressing. It's a sad backstory. We didn't really have that impact as much in the earlier episodes, but we got it when we did get the Brooks backstory. So I like how they added in here to kind of make us feel a little bit of pain before we went more into the story. When Zoro gets to see Mr. Nine, he actually recognizes him, which in the anime and manga, he has no idea who this guy is. How it wildly connects these storylines together with Baroque going after Zoro because they know who he is, they want revenge, and Zoro actually recognizes them as well, which just kind of teases us for what's to come in Whiskey Peak, because we didn't actually learn about any of this until Whiskey Peak. We still had Luffy punching Laboon, be it in a different way, but it still has a fun little moment of Luffy trying to calm down Laboon and trying to get him to not kill his friends with inside of him by singing Binks's Brew, which is new and actually an absolutely amazing scene, because it just gives us this really good moment between Luffy and Laboon to have Luffy try to calm him down and try to make him, you know, understand him a little bit more. Now, we also get Luffy doing a little bit of a tease for the Nika pose when he's doing the dance as well, which is just a nice tease for when we do get to Gear 5 and Kaido and all of that. Now, we have Luffy telling Laboon about people leaving, and sometimes you meet people who stay, which is a nice scene, but it does feel like we're missing some more of that comedic stuff because Luffy actually threatens to fight Laboon, and that's, you know, the more of a fun moment where he's like, you know what, I'll be coming back to fight you. So make sure that you're ready for that, rather than him saying, we're friends, we'll be back. Which I like both scenes. I think the friends part is really nice, but I wish they also added that fight part too, where Luffy's like, if you want to fight someone, I'll come back to fight you. Don't mess up a Jolly Roger, because they still put that on him, which is, again, a great moment. I love that they still kept it in here. There's just little pieces where I'm like, I wish we had both. I wish we had the friend part. I wish we had the fight part. That's just me being greedy, honestly. And Nami also gets her blog post from Crocus, like how she has an anime and manga as well. So just great scenes to kind of tie everything together. Now, we also get a new scene in this where Kobe and Helmeppo actually interact with Tashigi, which they don't really actually interact with Tashigi until all the way into the Egghead Island arc, where they're going to save Kobe on Pirate Island. So it's definitely a big change up, but it definitely teases how they know each other. And I do like that they added in here, because obviously they know each other by that point of the arc, because it's way later in the story, but setting up the groundwork for that is a nice little additive to this. It also sets up Tashigi's goal to go after all the swords, so I do like how they've added this in here. It gives her purpose. We knew what her goal was originally in the anime and manga, but this just added more depth to it. Crocus also mentions Laugh Tale, which he does mention it to them in the manga and anime as well. We did get a little added part about how he's part of Roger's crew, which was something mentioned at the end of that arc, with Crocus mentioning Roger by name after the Straw Hats leave. But that was episode 2. Let me know in the comments again if you saw anything else that was a nice little Easter egg or reference, or some of the story changes I didn't point out. Now, let's jump into episode 3. So with episode 3, it starts off completely differently, where we have Zoro training and seeing Mihawk and thinking about the failure that he had during the Barate arc, where he lost to Mihawk. And I think this is a great scene to add into this, because this gives us a moment. Zoro developing. He's trying to get stronger. He's still struggling with that loss, and it's something we didn't really see in the anime and manga. So I think it's just a nice added part. I mean, we got more of it in episode 3 as well, which we'll talk about when we get to it, but I do like how they've added this in here, and it's just a nice scene to move his character development in a positive way. Now, we did have Nami in a swimsuit as well, which I will say I'm shocked we didn't get Sanji simping over her, but because I talked about it before in the review, they are making him more of a gentleman and less of a perv, which is nice. I'm just surprised they put that in there and didn't have a little bit of simping. But they did give us a moment that's straight out of the anime and manga where the weather starts to change, and Nami talked about how the weather is consistently changing in the Grand Line, where it can go from snowing to spring, and how it changes constantly, which is a nice little part to kind of show us how the Grand Line is. Now, Usopp also mentions how he wants to build a snowman, and we see him doing that as well before it becomes springtime in this episode, which is actually something we see in episode 64 of One Piece. Luffy and Usopp are making snowmen on the deck, so it's a nice little reference to that scene from there. We have more scenes as well with Zoro interacting with Mr. Nine and how he's recruited to Baroque Works, continuing to tie in that conflict together and how that storyline is progressing, again, rather than him just talking about it in Whiskey Peak like he does in the anime and manga. Now, Luffy letting Vivi go because he trusts her and knows that she wouldn't hurt him, because that's not what he gets a sense of from her, is something from the anime and manga. He trusts people really easily that he can kind of tell. Like, he has a good sense of person, so it shows us, you know, early on what Luffy is like and how he is that person who can kind of see what kind of person someone is just by talking to them and understanding them. But once we get to Whiskey Peak, I will say the set design is absolutely amazing. It looks fantastic. But they did change up how they get to Whiskey Peak, where originally when they're going to Whiskey Peak, everyone kind of shows up on the shoreline and starts cheering them on, rather than the Straw Hats coming into town. But it still kept in those basic elements from the Whiskey Peak arc, and I thought they did a really good job with that. They just sped up a little bit, where they meet Mr. 8, they talk about how they love pirates, same from the source material, and then they start their party, where we have Nami's drinking competition with the sister. Love that they kept this in here, though, because it's just a nice, fun scene with Nami. We had a nice added scene of Luffy and Zoro, where Zoro talks about Mihawk and his loss, and Luffy reassures him that he's going to be the strongest swordsman. Like, it's a really nice bonding moment between captain and crewmate, because in the anime and manga, they just pass out after partying so hard. Zoro drinks a bunch, Luffy eats a bunch, and everyone just passes out after they have a great time. Now, we also have a scene where the girls that take Sanji upstairs are the same ones we see during the anime and manga, who are kind of hanging out with him while all the girls are surrounding Sanji and making his dreams come true. So a nice little reference to that. Now, the whole entire party sequence is pretty much changed up from the anime and manga, other than the few scenes that still took place and kind of added reminiscence and references from anime and manga. Where in this, we had Luffy eating pie, talking to Mr. 8, and then Miss Wednesday shows up, which is something that doesn't happen. Because Luffy's already passed out in the anime and manga, he didn't actually interact with them in this way. He actually just gets caught up in the situation later on, after all the fighting starts to begin. Now, in the anime and manga, Nami is not investigating what's happening at Whiskey Peak. Instead, she's actually rummaging through their stuff, trying to find any treasure, and then finds out what's been going on after the fight has already started as well. The only person that really knows what's been going on is Zoro, where from the start, he finds out that the island is full of bounty hunters, and they're trying to take out the pirates, and then he starts taking everyone on himself, while everyone else of the crew is passed out. Now, in this, they actually changed it up quite a bit, where while Nami's investigating them, she starts to fight them, Zoro gets caught while he's taking a piss in the back and then starts to fight them, and everyone starts to realize what's really going on. Luffy gets knocked out by Miss Wednesday, and it just kind of sets up the storyline in different beats, where instead of everyone being passed out, Zoro taking everyone on, everyone kind of starts to get their own little fight, except Usopp and Sanji, who get tied up by the girls and are kind of stuck there until Zoro comes in and saves them. The fight scenes were awesome, though. Like, the whole sequence with Zoro taking on Baroque Works was an amazing moment, really showing him kick some ass. Now, the thing is, the difference between the anime and manga is he did struggle a little bit in the live action, showing that he has still some growth to go through. But in anime and manga, he just demolishes everyone. He just takes them out. He takes out 100 men by himself. He takes out the Baroque Work top agents. Like, he does not have an issue during this fight whatsoever. But in this, they did give him a good moment as well, because he seemingly does kill everyone as well. Where in the anime and manga, it was a little bit left up to you as an audience member to figure out. But in this, because we see the bloody swords, we see how he's slashing them, we know he's taking them out. But the bloody swords did look fantastic. We see some moments from the anime and manga as well, where he gets sprayed by the sister with the smoke, flips up the table to go behind it. And it's just these moments that kind of connect the story and relate back to the original source material that I really like to see added into the adaptation. Now, they did change up the Miss Wednesday and Mr. 9 scenes when it came to Zoro fighting them, because he does take them on. But in this, we're missing Karoo, where Miss Wednesday rides Karoo to fight Zoro and then runs right past him. Now, in anime and manga, Zoro also fights Miss Monday, who's the sister, and is jacked, which they still did keep in here, but it plays out a little bit differently, where in the anime and manga, Zoro absolutely demolishes her by crushing her head and beats her down. He also fights Mr. 9, which they still kept it in pretty key elements from that fight, with using the chains and everything else, which I do like. They kept in all these little moments, like they're kind of references to the anime and manga, which I think did a really good job. They just changed up the sequence of how the events played out. Now, one of the other differences in this episode is because Luffy ends up going after Mr. 8 and Miss Wednesday, and they're not involved in the fight with Zoro, it is a little different, because he chases after them, finding out they want to steal his ship. They find out that they're trying to escape the island, which is something we don't find out until Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine show up to face them off. But at the same time, when that happens, Luffy wakes up, thinks that Zoro is the one that took out all these good people that fed him food, and starts to fight Zoro, which is something that happened in the anime and manga but didn't happen here. It's a fun comedic scene, but it's something that's like, I wish they kind of put in here, because it's a fun scene. It's kind of a ridiculous scene, but it's fun. And I feel like those are some of those moments that didn't get kept in that live action, were some of those fun, more comedic scenes. I feel like if we added all of them, it would have slowed down the pacing a lot, and it would take us forever to get through, but still, I kind of missed it. Now, in the anime and manga, when Miss Valentine and Mr. 5 start to fight back and start to take on Mr. 8, Mr. 9, and Miss Wednesday, they do reveal that, you know, they're actually the bad guys, and they're going after Vivi and Igaram. And Igaram tells Zoro that he needs his help. He needs a strong swordsman to take Vivi back to Alabasta, which in the anime and manga, Nami chimes in and says, I'll do it for 1 billion berries, which she still does here. However, they changed it up where they're actually telling Luffy instead of Zoro, and Nami's with Luffy chiming in on that. So they still kept in that one key part, which I love, because it's Nami. I got to keep in my Nami needing money dialogue just to show how money hungry she is. but they did switch it up with Zoro not being the one to be told about the situation first. But a lot of these sequences, the way they kind of did it to kind of swap up what's happening, I felt like it was to switch up the pacing to speed up the story and get them to the point where they're supposed to go. And also, one of the things they added during this episode that I haven't mentioned yet is that Zoro also, when he's fighting Baroque Works, he's seeing Mihawk, showing more of it weighing him down. Still more character progression and helping his character, so I like how they did that. And then when Mr. Five and Miss Valentine come to take on Vivi and them, Eiichiro actually takes him on himself using his guns that he has in his hair. He tries to fight back, but he ends up getting blown up, which does happen in the anime, but not by Mr. Five and Miss Valentine. Instead, while this is going on, Eiichiro actually dresses up like Vivi, goes to take another ship to try to distract Baroque Works so Vivi and the Straw Hats could get away from Whiskey Peak without them being chased down. And instead, Miss All Sunday, aka Nico Robin, comes in and blows up the ship. So they did change it up quite a bit here where we don't get that moment, but that was also like an eluded kill. Like, we didn't actually, they made us think he died. In this, it feels less like that and more like they actually just killed Eiichiro, which is a little bit more impactful and better than just faking out all the deaths that happened during all these arcs. It does add more weight to his death and what Vivi's going through. Now, the one thing I will say, and the biggest disappointment during all of this, is the fact that we did not have Karoo. I said this in the review, we're missing Karoo. He's a big part of this arc, and it has some absolutely amazing comedic moments during the future arcs after this part as well, until they get to Alabasta. And, like, one of the things, when they run back to the ship, Vivi won't leave without Karoo, and she's like, she won't leave without her damn duck. This duck, and he's on the ship. Like, that's a fun scene, and I wish we had that. I'm only livid because of that. Like, I just want Karoo, but I understand why they didn't put him in there, because the budget, the CGI to do a freaking giant duck would be a lot harder than, they would be able to do, but still, I'm mad. I wanted Karoo, and I'm disappointed we have to wait for him for a while. At the end, too, we see Mr. Nine saying he wouldn't betray Vivi, which is a direct reference to the manga and anime because he values friendship and loyalty, because he does help fight back against Mr. Five and Miss Valentine during that arc, but it just happens different where he, instead of being focused on Zoro during the arc, he's actually with Vivi the entire time, and they switch it up a little bit, but I think it still works and still keeps his core characters, but they seemingly do kill him, which R.I.P. Mr. Nine. And then with the end of the episode, they had Miss All Sunday coming in, which we'll talk about more in episode 4, because that's where her main scene is. So let's jump into episode 4 now. Now, episode 4 starts off with Miss All Sunday coming in to give them an internal pose to another island to get them off Baroque's trail. This happens in the anime and manga too, and Luffy breaking it as well, which I love that they kept the scene in because it shows that Luffy's like, no, I'm going to do what I want. We're going to follow our log post and we're going exactly where we want to go. And it's just setting up that future conflict with what's going to be happening with her character and how she's been more intertwined within the story. And we lead off to Little Garden. The whole scene with her there is pretty much like the manga and anime. She comes in, takes Luffy's hat. The only difference is that we don't see Sanji pulling a gun like he randomly does in the anime and manga, but it shows us these good moments of her using her devil fruit powers, showing that she's a threat, and just getting us ready for her coming in. And honestly, she just does an absolutely great job as Nico Robin. I absolutely love it so much, and I can't wait to see more of her as we go into the Alabasta arc. But as we get to Little Garden, we do get some fun moments with Sanji and Zoro talking about their little competition to see who can fight the biggest creature and bring it back for dinner. Now, in the anime and manga, they actually split up, where Zoro goes after a Triceratops and even makes a joke about it having 3 sword style, and Sanji takes on a T-Rex. Where in this, they only take on the T-Rex together, which is a little different, and I wish we got the Triceratops as well, but I feel like they took it out because it's just an extra thing to CG, and they didn't want to do that because of money. It always comes down to money. But it was a pretty cool scene of seeing both of them kick it down and then argue about who actually took down the T-Rex, and the T-Rex looked fantastic, so I really have no complaints there. Also, I just love dinosaurs, so if I get to see more, I'm happy with that. However, one of the changes they made is that Zoro actually gets hit by Miss Golden Week during this, which is something that does not happen in the manga and anime. And later on in the episode as well, Nami also gets hit by Miss Golden Week, which again doesn't happen. Instead, the only one that really has to deal with Miss Golden Week is Luffy when we get to that final fight during this arc. But we'll talk about that when we get to that point. Now, we do get the Brontosauruses that Luffy runs into. Now, in the anime and manga, he does jump onto it as well, but instead he actually jumps from one to another. He ends up pissing them off, gets eaten by one, and then Dory comes in to save him by slicing off the neck of the Brontosaurus and catching him. Which in this moment, they change it up with him actually climbing up on top of one, bringing Vivi on top as well, and then them talking about Alabasta, and Vivi mentions Karoo and how he's back in Alabasta waiting for her. Which, at least we did get a mention of Karoo, but in the moment in the anime and manga, Karoo is freaking out with Vivi about everything going on, which I do miss those comedic moments. Now, after Luffy and Vivi run into Dory, we do get some statues that he has with him. Now, the statues resemble 3 characters. We have Nika, the sun god, we have Broggy being one of the statues, and then Loki, but his silhouette form before we got his full design during the Elbaf arc. So cool that they kept that in there, because it's a nice tease for what's to come in the future, and also just referencing the manga and anime. Dory and Broggy both reference Elbaf which is great because they do talk about that in anime and manga as well when they're talking to the different characters. And Dory tells Vivi about how they honor their dead. So she uses a piece of Igaram's clothing that he gave her to burn it and honor his death, which really alludes to the fact that he's actually dead, which is something we never got in the anime and manga. So it is a nice moment to add more of that kind of dramatic weight that we need for his death and Vivi struggling through it. So I do like how they put that here. Now, Nami and Usopp get taken by Broggy while he's looking for Ale, just like how he does in the anime and manga. So nice little moment. And when Usopp is talking to him, he references fighting with a 5-ton hammer against a mole monster, which is something that's going to later happen in the Alabasta arc, where he takes on Miss Merry Christmas in Alabasta while he's using his 5-ton hammer. So this kind of alludes to the idea of the anime and manga, where Usopp's lies always come true. So I do like how they kind of put this in here to tease what's to come, especially for the people who've seen the anime and manga and know what's about to come. Now, Broggy also tells them about the winter solstice and the semla pastry that they eat, which is something we don't actually learn about until Big Mom's backstory in episode 836 and chapter 866 and 867. Where Big Mom learns about that in her backstory when she's a kid, when they eat the pastry for the winter solstice. Also, both Dory and Broggy look absolutely fantastic, and I love what they did with their designs because they look like the characters. They're giant. I love that they don't look super weird, so it doesn't feel out of place, and I love the One Piece world, so it's just great to see. Plus, we have Mr. 3 arriving to Little Garden, which is just great. He looks fantastic. I love the actor they chose for him because it just fits so well for the casting, and honestly, the casting for everything is just amazing. I think they did an overall great job with all the casting in this season. Now, they kind of speed up the duel between Dory and Broggy in this, where the volcano goes off and they go straight into the fight. Rather than getting a couple fights and talking between the characters each time they do the fight, they just go straight into that 100-year duel. And I do love how they have Usopp recognize the honor of their duel, and also keeping how Usopp wants to become a brave warrior of the sea and wanting to go to Elbaf one day, keeping that core character traits to kind of push him to be more of a courageous character. And it's just a really nice moment to add into this, and I love that they kept it because it just adds to his character, and it's an important moment for him. Now, like I said, with Dory versus Broggy, they did speed up this whole entire fight, and instead of Nami, Luffy, Usopp, and Vivi being split up from each other for the first couple fights, they're actually all together. Now, during this fight, they mentioned the sun god Nika, which is actually the earliest reference we've gotten of the sun god Nika at all. We didn't hear about the sun god Nika until way later in chapter 1018 and episode 1040 of One Piece, when Who's Who is talking about him. So very early on, mention of his character and getting us ready for what's to come with the whole ideology of who the sun god is. Very excited to see how they're going to dive more into it earlier than they do in the manga and anime. So curious to see what we're going to see in the future seasons of the show. Now, with the battle itself, they actually made a major change, where in the anime and manga, it's actually Dory who drinks the explosive barrel that blows up. It's not Broggy. So they changed up the two characters, which is okay. I think it's fine to change up these two characters because it gives us something different from the anime and manga, and it still plays on the same themes about what happened. Especially with when that actually happens during the scene in the anime. Dory drinks it and Luffy tries to get him not to fight. Dory stops him from interfering, where in this, Broggy looks at Usopp when Usopp tries to warn him about it. Usopp understands that this is the honor. They have to still fight. So I do like how they did that. Luffy doesn't actually notice Mr. 5, where instead, Mr. 5 actually comes down on him, blows him up, and captures Vivi while everything is going on. Now, when the Straw Hats got attacked by Broke Works, Vivi, Zoro, and Nami all got captured like they do here. They were actually just placed on his giant candle cake he has there, rather than going straight into his little base and then being brought over there. So they changed it up a little bit here, which is not a major change, but it's something they did change up. When Luffy does run into the battle, that's when he starts to have to face off against Miss Golden Week, where instead he actually gets captured by Miss Golden Week pretty early and is having tea, which is a reference to his fight with Miss Golden Week because he does have tea with her there. Now, Broggy in the anime is actually right next to the giant cake candle that's happening, and he gets covered in candle wax as well. Where in this, because he's seemingly dead off in the distance, and Dory actually gets stuck in his cave by Mr. 3, they did change that up. Instead of having the giants right next to them, they're away from the battle. Which I guess is just to add less CGI into the fight, so they don't have to worry about a giant CGI giant next to them, just to save some money, which I get why they did it, but it is something they left out, because while they're doing that candle scene in the anime, Zoro hypes up Broggy about getting ready to fight back, and both of them try to get out of the wax to take the fight to Mr. 3, but instead we don't have that here. Now, I already talked about some stuff in episode 5, so let's just jump straight into it, because episode 5, we talked about Luffy being with Miss Golden Week, and now Usopp comes and finds them there all depressed, which is like the anime, because when he is fighting Miss Golden Week in front of the giant candle with everyone else, Miss Golden Week does use the depression on him, and everyone's confused about what's going on until they get the explainer about how her powers work. But the one thing I will say they did with Miss Golden Week is very interesting, is they made her more crazy. Like, they definitely made her seem way more insane than she does in the anime and manga. Where in the anime and manga, she just kind of wants to take a break. She doesn't really want to be involved. She's kind of lazy. Where in this, she's more crazy, where she wants a plaything. And I think it adds to her character and makes us kind of think, like, what is going on with her? Like, why is she doing this? and make her seem more like a threat than she is in the anime and manga. The scene with Sanji going to Mr. Three's hideout, they added a nice scene of him looking through Baroque Works files and finding a bunch of files on each one of them. They were keeping him unknown for a bit until the end of the conversation where he does tell Crocodile that he's Mr. Prince, which is something that doesn't happen in the anime and manga. He actually tells him he's Mr. Prince later when he's taunting him in Alabasta over the transponder snail. So slightly different here, but they did still keep in the Mr. 13 and Miss Friday confrontation, and they just added it a little bit, where when Miss Friday appears in the window, Sanji pops up and snaps her neck, just like he does in anime and manga, which is great. Then he has a fun fight with Mr. 13, and I love how they did this fight, because it's like just quiet with him fighting in the background with Crocodile waiting on the other line. So I really like how they did that. It was just a nice fun scene overall, giving us Sanji being a badass fighting them.
And when I mean quiet, I mean that they were just having the music play very quietly when they were playing the opening, Believe Folder 5. So just a great freaking Easter egg reference for the openings of One Piece.
Now in this scene as well, Sanji doesn't say he killed his pets. So it feels like a scene just to piss off Crocodile, because in the anime, he actually says that he's still Mr. 3, and Crocodile thinks Mr. 3 has been messing up. And then when he's talking to Crocodile, they show Crocodile draining the moisture out of the plant, which is something he does straight out of the anime and manga as well. Now, after that moment, we do get back to the cake scene, where they're all being trapped and being turned into candle wax figures, which again is like the anime and manga, just slightly differently. They actually show Broggy away from the scene. He's still alive. Dory's sword was too dull to kill him, which is like the anime and manga. That happened to Dory. Broggy's axe was too dull to kill him. Now Zoro tries to cut his legs to get out of there, just like how he does in anime and manga, which is great. I love the scene. It's so stupid and it's fun, because Zoro's like, I'm gonna fight them by cutting off my legs. And even though he fails, it's a nice moment to kind of refer back to the source material. Now, they did change this up because we don't have Luffy there, of course, and there are other things that aren't happening while this is going on, but we did get some nice references to some things in the One Piece universe, where we have Mr. 5 reading a newspaper, and we see the Bliking pirates on there, which are Wappa pirates, who appear in the Drum Island arc. Then we get a reference to Water 7, which is a major location from One Piece and one of the major arcs from One Piece as well, where they go to find a ship right there. Then we also have a mention of a East Blue pet shop that reopens with Shushu, which is the dog in the East Blue that Luffy runs into in the beginning of his arc, which we did get a cameo of in season 1. It's nice to get a little reference to him all the way back from the beginning of the story. Now, in the anime and manga, Zoro does his little pose because he's like, well, if we're going to die, I want to have a cool pose when I die, but he does it in this as well, which is great to say. And he says that Luffy will come, which is just a nice moment of showing him trusting in his captain. Now, when Luffy's taking on Miss Golden Week, he starts to fight himself because of redirecting his punches with the paint, which he does do in the anime and manga as well, but he's actually punching the ground when it happens. Now, in the anime and manga, they don't force Luffy into the ocean and make him dumb himself as the Pirate King. Instead, he's just kind of there with them, not being able to help his friends until Usopp comes in to save the day. Usopp saves the day by setting Luffy on fire to burn off the paint, where in this, he actually jumps into the water to drag Luffy out from drowning and accidentally knocks the paint onto Miss Golden Week, which makes her go crazy, which doesn't actually happen in the anime and manga. So a nice little twist to make her character go a little bit more insane, and I'm curious if they're going to bring her back or if she's dead or what they're going to be doing with her. Now, they skipped over half the fight with Baroque Works with the giant candle because a lot of stuff happened during the anime, where we have Karoo and Usopp fighting against Mr. 5, which doesn't happen here. We don't have Luffy fighting Mr. 3 with his wax armor. So they don't have any of that in there, but they still have Luffy going after Mr. 3, chasing him into the forest, trying to figure out which one he is with his little wax doppelgangers. Now, the thing is, this is the end of the fight in the anime and manga, where he figures out which one is Mr. 3 and knocks him out, but Luffy struggles here and can't figure it out until he gets to the cave where Dory is, and takes on Mr. 3 that way, still using the wax that Mr. 3 puts on him to knock him out. So they changed it up quite a bit, but they still had some of those elements in there from anime and manga, which was nice. And then the fight with Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine was new as well, because in the anime and manga, Usopp sets a giant candle on fire that releases everyone to join the fight. In that, Vivi and Nami save Usopp from Miss Valentine, and Zoro comes out with his flaming swords to fight against Mr. 5 to save Usopp from him. Now, they did have some of those elements within this episode where Miss Valentine tries to take out Usopp, breaks the cake herself instead of it being fire, and then Nami and Vivi come in to save Usopp that way. And then they change it up where Nami sends Mr. 5 next to Zoro, who's still stuck on the cake, and then Zoro takes him on in that close quarter combat until Usopp sets him on fire, just like how he does in the anime. So a nice reference there to have Zoro come out with those flaming swords again and take down Mr. 5. Now, Usopp also uses his tobacco star against Mr. 5 like he does in the anime and manga, so I love how they kept in those little elements there, even though they did change up this fight quite a bit. But it was nice to see at the end of the day, after they beat Baroque Works, where they have Dory and Broggy being happy to be alive, they get to end their 100-year fight, and then we get to learn a little bit about why they're there. And they mentioned that they both took down giant sea kings, which was something we learned about their backstory in the anime and manga. So love that they added those pieces there. And then on top of it, they still had the giant island eater at the end where Dory and Broggy split it, sending the Straw Hats off to go on to their next adventure when they head to Drum Island. So I love how they kept in those elements, because those are like big moments from the anime that kind of work with the characters, sending them off and building that friendship between them all. So really good that they added that stuff in there. I will say that Mr. 3 does not kill Miss Valentine within the anime and manga, so that's a new thing they put in here, really killing off characters they're not afraid to do. And then, yeah, that was a great episode. You know, some of the changes aren't that big of a deal. I wish we got a little bit more with the fight against Mr. 3 and Baroque Works, but I think overall they did a great job. Now, with episode 6, we did get the start of a new storyline where we had Wapol meeting with Miss All Sunday, something that does not happen in the manga and anime at all, and it's something that kind of ties the stories together in this, which I think works for a live action where we don't have a lot of episodes to build on everything, where we can kind of interconnect the storylines in a different way. And this is just Wapol trying to get his country back after he was exiled, and they mentioned that Blackbeard was there, which is a direct reference to the anime and manga, where Blackbeard did come to the island at one point, and then I like that they reference it here as well. Now, it's interesting here because they give Wapol his devil fruit, the Munch Munch fruit, to give him his devil fruit powers, where when we first meet him in the anime and manga, he already has those powers, and he actually fights the Straw Hats on their ship, and Luffy just sends them flying into the ocean in this comedic scene in the anime and manga, which did not happen here. Instead, we just kind of go straight to Drum Island, with Nami struggling from her illness that she got on Little Garden. So they kind of sped that up, because there's a lot of little scenes that we can't speed past. Some of them are just comedic scenes that we can kind of just skip past. Even though they're fun, it makes sense why they skip past it to kind of push the story forward. Now, when they get close to Drum Island, it starts to get cold, and Zoro is shirtless, and he's not bothered by the snow, which is just a reference to the anime and manga, where when they're there, he's training in the cold water and in the snow, shirtless, as he's trying to get stronger and watching the ship. Even though they don't do that here, it is just a nice reference back to the anime and manga. Now, before we get to them getting to the actual island itself, we do catch up with Smoker and Tashigi that go to a marine base to investigate it, where they find some dead marine soldiers, and they also reference Marineford, the headquarters of the Marines, as well as just a major location for the One Piece world, which will end up being a Marineford arc later down the road. Now, Smoker is still focused on the Straw Hats, where he thinks that the Straw Hats were the ones that caused this damage here and not Baroque Works, because they weren't able to find any information on Baroque Works. So I like that they're still keeping that obsession with him. Now, we find out while they're at this base investigating it that Miss Thursday attacked the Marine base, a character we actually don't meet in the manga and anime, but she fights with a baseball, which I feel like is a reference to Alabasta, because we do have two characters who fight with a baseball bat and baseballs with Mr. 4 and Lasso. So I feel like that's just a reference to seeing them in the future and just a tease for what's to come. Now, Tashigi ends up taking on Mr. 11, who is in the anime and manga, but he's actually just captured when we see him. We don't see Tashigi taking him on. He first appears in episode 79 and chapter 128 of One Piece, but it was a cool fight to see Tashigi take this guy on, get one of the legendary swords back, and doing it all without spilling a drop of blood.
Which in the source material, we do see her getting the sword, we just don't see the fight, and we see Smoker talking about the mysterious organization, but he doesn't know it's Baroque Works.
Now, before we actually get to Drum Island, they give us a nice little flashback to Vivi and Wapol at the World Summit in One Piece, where all the kings are together discussing what's going on in the world. Now, the one thing with this major scene is that we actually don't get it until episode 91 in chapter 59 at the end of the Drum Island arc, where Dalton is the one that's talking about it. So it's very interesting to see that we got it early, but it makes sense to kind of set up Cobra scolding Wapol and the feud that will be going on with Alabasta and the Drum Island. So I like how they set this up here, and they also just mentioned the Revolutionary Army again and how they're becoming a problem, which is something that's straight out of the anime and manga. Now, they also reference the Ducks of Alabasta, which is just a nice reference to Karoo, who we don't have still. But during this scene, we also get a bunch of characters that we actually don't see until way later into the story of One Piece.
Until episode 882.
Chapter 823 for the Reverie arc. And then later we get more of that scene in episode 957 and chapter 956 for the aftermath of the Reverie arc. Now, we get to see King Tacos of Shishino Kingdom. We get to see King Seki of Louisia, who becomes a big part of the later arcs. So if you know, you know. And then we get to see T the Fourth of the Aegis Kingdom. Don't know if I pronounced that right, but yeah, cool. They also talk to warlords, who are the pirates that work with the world government. We're getting a tease for them because Crocodile is one of them. And then they also have Hamburger, who is actually a king that appears in the anime and manga. And then they talk about the Queen of Fishman Island, who dies, which is Orihime, who we'll learn more about during the Fishman Island arc. So they did reference a bunch of stuff that happens way later, and they kind of combined some scenes. but it was cool to kind of start getting the implications of the world government and what's going on here. They also added the part where later in this episode where Vivi gets slapped by Wapol and Dalton sees it, and that all happens in the anime and manga as well. So just some nice scenes to kind of tie in how Dalton knows Vivi and what's really going on with the royalty of Drum Island and of Alabasta. Now, when the Straw Hats get to Drum Island, Usopp mentions that there might be snow monsters here, which I feel like is a reference to the Lapums that are there, the carnivorous rabbits that are within Drum Island that they fight in the anime and manga, but it also is probably a reference to Chopper being seen as a monster as well. But when they do get to Drum Island, instead of being on the shoreline and being on their ship, instead they're actually going straight to the village, but the same scene pretty much plays out. They try to talk to them, the Drum Island villagers shoot them, Vivi gets shot, Luffy threatens to fight them, and then Vivi calms them down saying that's not something a captain should do. So just kind of having those same elements in there, which is great, where Vivi's trying to be more diplomatic because she's a princess. She understands the more kind of interpolitics stuff that they need to deal with when going to different islands, and they can't just punch and fight everyone. But when they arrive in the settlement, we do get another direct reference to the Lapums because we get to see their skin. They skinned those bunnies alive and they put them on the freaking display. Disappointed we didn't get them in these episodes, but we will talk about more when we get to those specific scenes later. At least we got reference to them. Now we get to meet Dalton, and he also references the fact that Blackbeard had been on the island and laid siege to it, which is something we do see in anime and manga, where he does tell the group that as well. The only thing they really do here that's different from anime and manga is they speed up the pacing quite a bit. Instead of Usopp and Vivi going to look for Kureha in another village, they actually just go straight to the mountain. We don't actually get to see Kureha and Chopper going to another village as well to heal people up. They skip past that, and they're just in the castle, which there's just a bunch of extra scenes that aren't super necessary. It's just something to introduce us to them before we actually meet them. So it is okay that we kind of sped past them. And since they didn't do any of the Zoro training stuff, they kind of blow past all of his little funny comedic stuff within the earlier parts of this arc, and they just kind of put him with the rest of the Straw Hats. But that's where we get to Luffy and Sanji kind of going to climb up the mountain. We do skip the entire scene of Luffy and Sanji going against the Lapum bunnies, which I am disappointed we didn't get that because it's like a fun scene. It's just them fighting a bunch of bunnies that are carnivorous, trying to eat them, but then also gives us like a very important moment later after there's an avalanche and Luffy saves one of them, making the baby bunny like him and wanting to help out and save the day later. So like, I feel like we are missing some of the little fun moments between the characters, Luffy bonding with random animals, but I understand why they probably didn't do these characters because there are a bunch of CG giant carnivorous rabbits that they would need to CG, and that would cost a lot of money. But I am glad we still got Luffy carrying Nami to the top of the mountain, which is just a great scene overall. Now, the only difference is that Sanji doesn't climb the mountain with them because he actually gets knocked out during the fight with the Lapums, and Luffy has to carry him up there as well. But I did like how they still kept in the scene where Sanji falls and Luffy catches him with his teeth. Just a great moment to keep from the anime and manga, and just an important moment to show what a captain is willing to do for his crew. Also, just a little key details on the scene where he's all bloodied up as he's climbing up and has his lips blue because he's getting frostbite. Fantastic moment to just show how cold it is and how much he was struggling. Also, Drum Castle looks absolutely sick. Set design, amazing. Love what they did. But we also had a really good moment of Dalton and Zoro with the scene where Dalton and Zoro are talking about the fight that's about to come and him and Zoro coming to an understanding. And it's just like a really good moment to show Zoro being ready to help the village fight back against the threat that's going to come. But then we get to the moment of Nami being saved and being woken up and seeing Chopper for the first time. Now, a lot of the stuff that happens in the scene does happen in the anime and manga scene for scene, which is great. But then when Luffy shows up and thinks he's going to get eaten because he wakes up in a hot tub of water was new. But it was a nice, fun scene. I think it just added to like more comedic stuff that we've been missing for most of this season. And I will say most of the comedic stuff seemed to be in these last 3 episodes rather than early on. But that's okay because I think it worked. That's why I think the last 3 episodes are the best episodes of the season in a whole. Now, the one thing we did miss during this part of the arc was the fact that in the anime and manga, Dr. Kureha actually throws weapons at Sanji and Luffy throughout it, and Sanji and Luffy also chase Chopper around the castle, which they don't do here. It's just a fun comedic scene. It's like I said, it's just something that, you know, they probably do without, but it shows the kind of craziness that goes on at Drum Castle, and I do wish we had a little bit of it, or at least a tease for it, but it's okay we didn't get it. It's not the biggest complaint, it's just something I love to see in the anime because I think it's hilarious. But episode 7 takes a completely different shift because that's where we get into depression mode, where we learn about Chopper's backstory. Now, this whole episode was pretty much identical for a lot of the moments for the anime and manga, which I really love that they didn't change too much about Chopper's backstory. They did start off with Chopper getting attacked by the villagers, being called a monster and being shot at while he was just wanting to be friends. You know, they took out a little bit of a context with him going to the village first and noticing them. They just kind of went straight into him being shot at, but that's okay. It gives us an important part about his backstory and shows the struggles he's gone through. Sanji and Luffy also talk about how they could cook him, but they just didn't have the chasing him around the castle. They even call him a raccoon, which is just a nice reference to the anime and manga where people call him a raccoon until he gets mad at them and corrects them and saying he's a reindeer. But back to the backstory, we have Hiruluk running from Wapple's men, which does happen in the anime and manga where he does run into Dr. Kreha. The only thing we're missing is before this, he actually turned someone into a frog when trying to help them, which Dr. Kreha does mention during this. So I like that they still kept that in there. We didn't actually see the scene, which is okay, but they did reference it, which is good enough. And they keep in Dr. Hiruluk wanting to save the island. And it's just a great moment showing what he's willing to do to save the island. And then he comes across and saves Chopper after being shot. He did the same thing by taking off his clothes, and it's just this really wholesome moment of him saving Chopper. I will say the one thing I was not expecting from this episode, though, is Chopper swearing, but I love it. I love Chopper swearing. It feels out of place in some ways, but it also kind of just works so well because it's like this cute, adorable creature swearing. The one thing I will say is we didn't get to see Chopper being shunned by the other reindeer for having a blue nose and having his human fruit, but he does mention it to Hiruluk. And I wrote in my notes, if anyone touches a hair on my boy Chopper, I'm throwing hands because I love Chopper so much. He's such a great character. And I love that we also have Hiruluk telling Chopper about the skull and crossbones, saying it's a symbol of unshakable faith, absolute strength that represents the belief that nothing is impossible. And he tells him about the pirates and setting sail. Like, it's just a really good moment between the two characters, which I love just pretty much everything they kept from anime and manga because it was so good, they didn't need to change anything. But with saying that, they did change one thing. The fact that Hiruluk's base is in a fallen tree
instead of it being located in the side of a mountain.
Not a big change. It's just something I noticed. Now, we did get into the depression mode pretty quickly after that, where we do get Hiruluk sending Chopper away because he knows he's dying, so he wants to save Chopper the pain of seeing him die in front of him and just wants Chopper to go live his life somewhere else and be happy. So it's just like kind of that trying to push him away before he get hurt, and then it leads to Chopper getting the poisonous mushroom that he gives to Hiruluk eating it, and I'm just in literal tears during all this because it's so sad. Like, it's so sad in the anime, it's so sad in the manga, and it's so sad in the live action, but they did such a good job with it. But that leads into Hiruluk going to the castle to face Wapple in the final moments, which this is a little different from what happens in the anime and manga, because in the anime and manga, he just goes to the edge of the castle, drinks his drink, gives his speech, and then blows up, where in this, he actually storms the castle, which I think was a pretty good moment to show him throwing bombs, taking on the men, and getting into the castle to face Wapple. And it was just this really good moment that I think added to what we got in the anime and manga. Now, he still gives the same speech, which was done phenomenally, and I just appreciate every moment of that scene in its entirety because I think they just did an amazing job with it overall, and Hiruluk's actor was great. We still have Chopper running to the castle to try to save Hiruluk while Hiruluk is blowing himself up, and Chopper comes in and Dalton stops him just like the anime and manga. The only thing they didn't do is Dalton show off his ox fruit while he's stopping Chopper, telling him to go away to save his own life, which I am a little disappointed we didn't get that, but it felt like they saved that for episode 8 when he comes in to save the village against the monsters that Wapple created. So I'll forgive him for that because we did get a pretty cool moment next episode. But at the end of this episode, we did get a really good moment of Luffy telling Chopper that he respects all pirate flags and it should be hung, which leads him to putting it on the castle, which is different from the anime and manga because it's actually already hung up on the top of the castle before Luffy even gets there. However, I think it works because it just gives us a nice moment between Luffy and Chopper and how they're going to bond in the future. Now, Robin ends up showing up on Drum Island, which doesn't actually happen in the manga or anime at all. She's nowhere near it. She only shows up in Alabasta, but it's just to lead us to her bringing Wapple here and setting up the conflict for Wapple taking on the kingdom. Now, we do have Dalton taking 3 arrows to the chest, just like he does in the anime and manga. It just happens slightly differently, but it still works, still keeping those story beats in, just in a different way. Now, in episode 8, we see Dalton being taken down by Wapple, which doesn't happen in the anime and manga, but it still gives us the importance of his threat and showing what Dalton's willing to do to stand up for what he thinks is right. We also have more of Robin dealing with Vivi, which is something that doesn't happen in the anime and manga because she's not in Drum Island, but it really does set up Robin being a bigger threat, toying with Vivi and making her seem more evil than she really is, which I do like what they're doing. They're setting her up to be a bigger threat, a bigger character, and I think it worked really well. Now, Wapple ends up turning all his men into combinations of people and weapons, which is crazy because he does not do that in the anime and manga, at least to all his men. He does it to Chess and Kuromemo, which he combines them to, but that only happens in the final fight between Luffy and everyone else, not in a fight like this. Instead, Zoro's the one that takes on just the regular men at the bottom of the mountain in the village, rather than taking on a bunch of creatures. But it did add for like a big final, and I think it worked. And honestly, I think that was pretty cool compared to what the anime and manga did. Like, I think adding those freaking monsters was just like a way better final for a TV show than what it would have been if they didn't do that. Now, another big change is Usopp and Vivi. Usopp doesn't make her a tool to get to the top of the mountain. Instead, they all take the gondola to get back up to the top to meet up with Luffy and everyone while they're taking on Wapol. But they can't do that, of course, because Wapol destroyed the gondola that was mentioned in the first episode. Now, we also get a big moment between Sanji and Nami in this episode, revealing something that we actually don't get until episode 819 in chapter 841 of One Piece, which is Sanji talking to Nami about cooking for his mom and how he used to cook a bunch of food that she would eat even if it wasn't good. It was still really important to him, and his mom really always made him feel seen, which is something we do not learn for so long. That is Sanji's backstory. That is something we don't get until way later in the story, which I love the moment. It's a great moment, but it's just something that's completely new, and I really enjoyed the scene. Even though, you know, we don't actually learn about this till way later, because it's a big shocking moment when we do learn about Sanji's real backstory later on. Another change they make is that Dr. Correa, when Wapol shows up, doesn't actually try to run away like she does here. Instead, she faces him at the front of the castle with Chopper to tell him to go away. But in this, it kind of gives us a really good moment with Correa and Dalton. In the anime and manga, Dalton's actually buried under the avalanche after he gets dug up by Zoro and everyone. Zoro carries him up to the top of the castle. I feel like this is a great moment for Dalton and Correa to work together to build a relationship, what it's going to be like for the future, and how they're going to rebuild the Drum Kingdom. So I do like this moment. I think it works. It's just something that's a little different from the anime and manga. Now, I do really love the moment of Luffy stretching mid-monologue when Wapol comes to fight them, because it just feels like classic Luffy. Like, I felt like this is one of the most classic Luffy moments out of this entire season, and it was just so much fun, especially with Wapol also getting mad at him later in the fight for not taking it seriously. Like, that is classic Luffy, and I love how they did that. Also, the added part of Vivi standing up to Wapol was fantastic. It's something that doesn't happen in the anime and manga, but it does show her standing her ground, knowing what it means to be a true leader, and punching him was just a great moment to show how her past is now coming back to the present, her standing up for herself after Wapol hit her when she was a kid. So just a really good moment to have that full circle moment come here. Now, when the weaponized monster army attacks the village, it was pretty cool. They look freakish. They look absolutely hilarious. They look crazy. But I like what they did here because they turned the gag into something more serious. Dalton comes in that pretty dope moment with his ox fruit. We have Correa coming in later to blast some of them, which was a pretty badass moment. And then one of the creations actually looks like the Chess Marimo version that we saw in the anime and manga. So it was cool that they kind of had that little tease there to kind of reference what happened, because we didn't actually get those two characters being combined during their fight with Chopper and Sanji. Now, in the manga and anime, Chopper is the one that faces off against Chess and Kurumemo, and Correa actually stops Sanji from fighting too, because she wants to show off Chopper's strength. But in this, they change it up where both of them work together to take on these characters, which I think works because it builds up the characters' relationships, them trusting each other, working together, gives us Chopper using his heavy point. It's just a really good moment of seeing what Chopper's capable of. The only thing we didn't get to see during this was Chopper using his guard point and his arm point like he does in the anime and manga. But overall, the fight was pretty good with both of them taking him on, and I like what they did. Now, like I said, the fight with Wapol was probably the most comedic fight we've gotten all season, and I really enjoyed it with Luffy not taking it seriously. I will say they did a really good job with the effects for Wapol by making his mouth go bigger, which I thought was really cool, and having Vivi coming in to help fight was just a nice moment, showing her fight back against the man who slapped her, and based on their history, it was a nice, good moment to tie everything together. Even with her already doing the one punch, it was great to have her more included in all of this. And then Luffy protecting Hero Luck's Jolly Roger, absolutely fantastic moment. Even though it's not the same as the anime and manga where he's standing on the top of the castle doing it, I still think it still hits the same effect. I just really enjoyed the pose that he does in the anime and manga, and I think that's a little bit more iconic, but still a great moment of seeing Luffy stand up for Chopper and protecting the Jolly Roger. Dalton thanks them all just like how he does in anime and manga, and Luffy asks Chopper to join the crew.
Now, this scene is pretty much the same with Luffy asking Chopper to join the crew, where he's hesitant, he says no, and then he starts to think about it, and then he goes back to Dr. Correa to say, hey, I want to join the crew. But then she yells at him and starts throwing stuff at him, which is her sign of showing him love, where she's just pushing him away rather than saying, yes, go do it.
Now, she still does get mad at Chopper in this live action and still pushes him away. They just don't throw the weapons at him.
Now, another great moment is when Chopper joins the crew to head down. They take the sleigh to go down the line that goes down from the mountain to the ground, which is a really great moment. I love that they kept it in, and it's just really impactful to show him joining the crew and all the crew being happy that he's coming with them as they go down to the Going Merry.
Now, when they get to the Going Merry, Chopper pulls out his rumble balls, and he says they're a secret, which is just a nice little tease for what's to come in Alabasta when he uses his rumble balls to turn into his different points like guard point and arm point. Now, I'm grateful that they still kept in the cherry blossom scenes of Dr. Correa lighting the sky and making it pink. Just a great moment to have Hero Luck's whole goal come out to play, and it's a really important part to just show all of everything that happened. Chopper's leaving his home, but he gets to see that his father's goals were achieved. Also, Zoro putting Chopper on his shoulder was great. It's called back to the anime and manga where Chopper rides on top of Zoro at many different points in the story. And on top of it, Chopper crying his eyes off is such a great sad moment because it's something that's from the manga and anime, and I love that they kept it in here, just showing Chopper sad leaving his home, but also happy at the same time. Dr. Kreia also mentions Gold D. Roger, which was the first time in the anime and manga that she mentions it as well in the same scene, where she mentions it in chapter 154 and episode 91 of One Piece. This is also the part where Dalton would have referenced back to the World Summit, which we saw in the earlier episodes. So this is the part where in the anime it actually happened. Now we catch up with Smoker, who's heading to Alabasta now, and they also mention that Garp knows that Mr. Zero is Crocodile. They don't specifically say that, but they say that Garp knows his identity, which is something that does not happen in the anime and manga. Now, that leads us into the moment of Mr. Zero being revealed as Crocodile. Crocodile just looks so goddamn good. I love the costume design. I can't wait to see him and use the Sanzan powers within the next season. It's going to be so freaking awesome, and I'm so excited for it. The only real difference from the scene from the anime and manga is the fact that they use Wapol as like a plot point to kind of work with their plans, and the fact that they revealed that Miss All Sunday was Nico Robin here, because that doesn't actually happen until the end of Alabasta, when Crocodile reveals it to everyone else. So very interesting they added it in early here, but I feel like they only did that to kind of tease what's to come and also get us excited for Nico Robin appearing. We also get to see one of Crocodile's crocodiles swimming around in the tank behind him, which he does have a bunch of them, so it makes me wonder if we're going to see one or if we're going to see multiple in the next season. Especially with all the CG that's about to come for season 2, they better have a bigger budget because there's a lot of different CG things they need to do. But that's it for One Piece. I really enjoyed it, even though there were things I was a little mad about, which is honestly only Crew. I was only really mad that Crew wasn't in this season. I know why they didn't do it. I was just mad and greedy and wanted him anyways. But yeah, that was my One Piece video. Let me know if there's anything else you noticed with the Easter eggs and references in the comments down below. And let me know what you thought about the story changes. Was there anything you liked, you didn't like, anything you wish they did include? I would love to hear it and also hear your thoughts on it. Plus, on top of it, I know this is a long video, so thank you for sticking all the way through. I'm at an hour and a half right now when it comes to recording this. I know it's going to be less when I cut it down, but I'm like, God damn, I didn't mean to talk for this long. But I love One Piece, so I got to talk about it as much as possible. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, helps out the channel a lot, and you get to stay up to date with all my other videos. The next kind of breakdown stuff we will be doing is Daredevil Born Again, which is coming out on March 24th. So make sure you stay tuned for that if you like Marvel stuff. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you next time when it comes to anime, Marvel, or DC.